ahead and get started with this meeting of the Economic Development Tourism Committee. At this time, I will ask Representative Bruce if he'd like to come and present House Bill 387. And this is a hearing only for this bill. We do have another bill on the way.
Testing. Yep, we're on. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate you having this hearing on this piece of legislation that I think is long overdue in Georgia, and we appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about it. I have with me Mr. Rodney Littles, who helped pull this information together based on factual information from Georgia as well as some other parts of the country. And so, again, we appreciate it. What this bill will do is create the Department of Economic Development within the division of, it will create the Division of Minority and Women's Business Employment within the Department of Economic Development. What we're trying to do is create some balance. There's a lot of, as you know, a lot of money that's spent by the state, and when we looked at the how that money was being distributed amongst all of the various groups that exist in the state, we saw that there were some disparities, and that there were certain groups that were eliminated or not able to participate for various and sundry reasons. And all this does is ask that we put together a division within that Department of Economic Development that will be available to help entities or agents or individuals that have been excluded from the process over the years. And that could be all kinds of folks. You know, we've identified specifically women, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, African American, and some other groups that have been traditionally eliminated from this process or not included in the process. And that's really the gist of the bill. There was a study done at a federal level that included Georgia and some other states that kind of showed that these disparities existed, and that's what this is standing to correct. Mr. Littles, if it's okay, you know, I wanted him to talk specifically about it because he did the research on it.
Thank you, Representative Bruce. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for this opportunity to address this issue. I've had the pleasure of researching this issue on behalf of Representative Roger Bruce and Pedro Marin over the last 2 years. I believe Georgia is strongest as the weakest link in its economic chain. House Bill 387 aims to spur growth in sectors of the state's business community that has lagged behind for years and experiences a significant disparity in receiving contracts from the state. This bill will create business opportunities which will create jobs for economically disadvantaged communities. This will be accomplished by promoting those businesses owned by people who have historically been left out of the supplier chain by state agencies in Georgia. The impact of this bill, when successful, will reduce the demand for entitlement programs and contribute to increased tax revenues for local, state, and federal government entities. House Bill 387 is modeled after the executive order signed by President Richard Nixon to create the Office of Minority Business Enterprise in the mid-1970s. Since that executive order has been signed, it has been replicated by many states in the Union and adopted by Fortune 500 companies as a strategic business discipline. By passing this bill, Georgia will join the family of progressive states that recognize the benefit of diversity to strengthen their state's job creators. This will attract more major corporations to the state because of the programs that this bill will implement. I am proud of the members of the House that have brought this idea to the state of Georgia. I urge passage of this bill to create the Division of Minority and Women's business development in the Department of Economic Development. And just in closing, I'd like to say that, and then I'll answer any questions, that in 1992, the Georgia House implemented a study committee on minority business enterprise that found that the state's only MBE program in the Department of Transportation was not meeting its federally mandated goals to purchase goods and services from MBEs using federal dollars. On state-funded transportation projects, the results were insignificant at best, and other state agencies had no MBE program at all. In 2012, the Georgia Department of Transportation conducted this disparity study, which confirmed little progress had been made since 1992 in diversifying the purchasing of goods and services from minority businesses.
Thank you, Representative Bruce. Mr. Little, as a lot of committee members have joined us after we started, this is just a hearing at the present moment. It's a hearing, and if anyone has any questions, Representative Williams, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question, Representative Bruce, I've been listening to your legislation, and thank you for bringing it. My question is, why just the Department of Economic Development?
Well, it's a start, and that's where we saw the obvious disparities, and the thought process was that would probably be the quickest and easiest area to approach first, and that's basically the essence of it.
Okay.
Representative Williams, as Representative Bruce indicated, that's where the program would be housed, but the impact would be across all state agencies. It would just develop the program for all state agencies, not just the Department of Economic Development, but that's where the program would be housed and administered.
Just to follow up, I don't see that in the bill.
Well, if you look at the sections which deal with goals and the agencies, all state agencies, higher authorities, higher education institutions would be required to submit goals and reports periodically.
Okay, I was just looking at, if I might, Mr. Chairman, in the preamble of the bill, it says relating to the Department of Economic Development, revision, and even the creation of a director. I understand that can be worked through, but this specifically addresses the Department of Economic Development, and it would be hard, quite a stretch to move from. There's no mention of any other but one department in your preamble of the bill.
Oh, if you go further in the bill, though, it explains exactly which agencies, etc.
Okay, I understand.
Representative Braddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to figure out at what point, I thought that there was an open bid process. I know my company in the 80s as a female business enterprise was always able to bid on any state contracts. So I would think that this would have the reverse effect in that you start to exclude, white males from being able to bid on contracts if you start saying we're going to make special provisions for minorities and women to bid.
No, it doesn't do that at all. The program is to promote and assist firms that have been left out of the process to enter the process, which would mean get on the bidders list, make sure they have the resources they need to be competitive. It doesn't provide a set aside, it's established goals, and particularly in the subcontracting area, where most of the major corporations that receive prime contracts, zero in this study from DOT were of minority origin at all.
But
so
they open it up to all to bid. It's not exclusive.
No, this doesn't exclude anyone who can bid. No, ma'am.
Right. And I'm talking about the process we have now without making a separate delineation of this special category we want to put businesses into. The process currently allows for anyone, any company to bid at this point.
It doesn't change it.
Right, but what I'm saying is we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist because we already have an open process where any company can bid.
We have an open process for bidding. The problem is on selection. And, while anybody can bid, the statistics show that not everyone that's participating in the process has equal opportunity in terms of winning that award. And that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to get people to look at the process, to look at the thought, whatever the thought process is, and how you decide who actually gets these contracts, to see why statistically it's not being divvied out, equally or according to what the population in the state is.
Well, it's typically a price-driven decision when they choose a company. It's based on the prices that were submitted.
I'd like to believe, as you're stating, I really would like to believe that the process was equitable, and that the process would allow for, people to participate across the state. But the statistics just don't support that. And so what we're trying to do is find out, by having this department, how do we make people, women and minorities and other groups, how do we get them to the level where they can win the contracts? How do we, teach them, what the process is, how to, maneuver through the system, whatever it takes in order to be able to be successful at those bids. The problem is not that you allow us to bid. The problem is that you don't get selected. And
If they're not being selected and it's based on price, then that's probably the factor that...
I'd like to believe that was the only reason, but we don't know that. The point is, if there are companies that have not had the ability or the method, if you want to call it that, to put things in place that would allow them to be the lowest bidder or the best bidder or whatever the case may be, or the lowest price. What we're trying to do is just help people learn how to become more competitive. And, there are those that have significant amount of resources traditionally are not part of these groups, and they have not had the chance to learn these processes and learn how to do it. All this is to try to give people a chance to learn how to compete and how to be part of this process.
Well, I've found that entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial spirits lends itself to those people being resourceful and figuring out what they need to do to win bids without putting a government program in place that categorizes them a certain way and puts others at an unfair disadvantage. So, that's a trademark of an entrepreneur. They're innovative, they're resourceful, they have the ability to figure things out and look at what they need to do to be successful, whether it's a bidding process or a sales process that they're involved in, or, they're not going to be very successful as an entrepreneur. So I don't think sending them through a training program is going to change that. That kind of comes from within. So.
Okay, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. I appreciate it. Thank you, though.
Representative Holmes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this bill necessitate additional staffing? If so, what is the fiscal impact of that?
That would be determined by that department. Right now, we're talking about 2 people within the bill, and then I'm sure that those 2 individuals would determine what assistance or help they needed. And some of this can be done, if we have these 2 people that we're talking about, some of this could be done, through volunteerism. Some of it can be done through our existing educational system. We're just looking for some people to organize and make a conscious effort to include these folks. So that's to be determined. But you're not talking a lot of money.
Representative Dukes.
Thank you, Representative Bruce, for bringing this bill. But is it not true that the process that you are advocating here is one of a race-neutral status that does not give any advantage to any race or gender when it comes to the bidding process? That it still will be something that will be considered, that will be based on price?
That's correct. And all we're trying to do is just, get people educated so that they can learn the process and be able to effectively compete in the process.
Is it further not true that part of what the bill addresses is establishing goals and a method in which to collect that data.
That is correct.
Is it further not true that this is something that the state has done previously and that it was not an additional cost to any agency, because what they developed was minority liaisons officers at every level of procurement, and all they did was collected data?
That's correct.
Is it further not true that what this does is that it merely expands the pool so that people who have not been included in the process, the officer will merely develop relationships with people who have been included, with those who have not been included, so that we begin to start actually getting better prices, because now we have a larger pool of vendors.
That's correct. More people will be participating and hopefully drive the prices down.
Thank you for this legislation.
Thank you.
Representative Williams, I'm going to let you close out with questions, since this is a hearing and we do have other business before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick, this is my understanding, and being very familiar with this, Department of Transportation here in Georgia has had it for years, just has not been implemented strongly. This is nothing new. The DOT has been using it for 20 years right here in Georgia. As a member of the Development Authority in Liberty County, we have had it in place for 7 years. 99% of our contracts still go to white males, but they're encouraged to hire minority subcontractors. Hadn't changed any cost, it's just been more inclusive. It hadn't cost anybody a contract since I've been on the board. Just wanted to pass that. Thank you.
We had one more person that had a question. Representative Marion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to, not quite a question, but we were celebrating Asian Pacific Islander American Day at the Capitol today, and I had the pleasure of just coming back from the depot with a luncheon, and I spoke briefly about HB 387 and what Representative Bruce's intentions, and the response from the crowd was positive. Because as we have been mentioned, they have felt that they've been left out of the process, and knowing that they can register and apply and bid, and again, as the pool grows, pricing will be an incredible factor of providing those contracts. So I just want to mention that several groups from the Asian American community are supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Marion. Sir? Yeah. Is anybody here from Economic Development? We all are. What are you? What? Representative Bruce, Mr. Earl, thank you for presenting this bill to us. And
Yes, one question. What is the next step?
I will leave that to the pleasure of the chairman of this committee, who is not here today.
Okay, so I just need to circle back with him?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, this time we'll hear from Representative Paul Battles on HB 318. No, you're not on, you're right.
Actually, substitute House Bill 318. It's LC 343809 ERS. You have passed on this bill before. Our chairman presented this some weeks ago, and it passed through this committee, went on to rules, and because of a change, it's now been asked to come back to rules to be reapproved. And really, there's two very simple changes to this. As you remember, in the original bill, the 318, it said that all projects would be at the discretion of the governor only. That has been removed. The second thing is there's been an addition to that in light of the fact that there's some negotiation, of course, as you know, with the Atlanta Falcons and a stadium. So this would also apply to that area of economic development, and that has been added. So this is another piece of the puzzle that we've been trying to put together to encourage economic development by giving a refund over a 10-year period to those who make capital investments in the state of Georgia. As I said, and I'll answer any questions that you might have. Again, that's the only two changes, and that is the sole discretion of the governor has been removed, and the addition of adding the stadium and like type projects.
Thank you, Representative Battles. We do have some questions.
Okay.
Chairman Dixon.
On page 2, it still says that approved tourism attraction music project that was approved by the governor.
On page 2. I was
line 57.
Yes, it does. That is not. That needs to be changed. That needs to be changed because it gets to rules and just come back here again. So there is a correction to this that needs to be made. And as I said, this is the first time I've had an opportunity to look at it. Do we have counsel? This came from the governor's office, and from that, they had removed this, and supposedly all the references to the discretion of the governor were supposed to have been removed from that. As early as about 10 minutes ago. And as I said, our chairman was not able to be here, and of course he had not been able to see the draft of this, and I do not see any other areas. See it over on page 4, line 109 is where it was struck, sole discretion of the governor, and it goes to the Commissioner of Economic Development and Commerce and Community Affairs, and I would imagine, if I could presume, that it would also be changed there on line 57 to reflect the same. And Legislative Council agrees with that, and we can make that change. So we will need to amend this. And I do appreciate you pointing that out, because I assume something, and you know how that goes.
I've been told.
You've never lived that, but...
Board's lighting up here. We will address that before we take any action. So, who's number 15?
Mr. Chair, just quick, this is a hearing, or are we going to take a vote on this?
We will be
on this bill. So do we going to fix it now, or are we going to motion table it to see it later?
We need to fix it now.
Yeah, okay, we'll fix it.
All right.
Yeah, I was waiting from council to see if that was exactly, they were proper. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, more questions. Let's move on. Who's 19? You, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the chairman, these papers are still warm right off the copy machine. It feels to me like...
There's a reason.
I'm looking, but where's the other change that was made? Can you tell me?
I believe it's line, was it 157?
Right, 87.
Let's see.
187.
That's best.
177 is one.
I see that one, but the other one pertaining to, you mentioned the stadium.
87.
Yeah, this is over, let's see, what was this? 87, after amenities.
Okay.
Spectator sports and facilities or complex.
Very good, thank you.
Who's number 23? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir. I have a question. I'm glad that you pointed out line 109 on page 4. The question is, does the inclusion of, I have two questions, as a matter of fact. Does the Commissioner of Economic Development and the Commissioner of Community Affairs replace and substitute? Is that a substitute?
That's a substitute to the
Substitute to
governor.
the governor. Okay, and my second question is, would not a project of this size not qualify for the bidding process in the state?
That would, all this will do will give the ability to incentivize those who would consider coming to Georgia and make capital investments. All the other normal regulations would have to be naturally through the business process. All this is an incentive piece of legislation so that they can recoup some of the capital investments that they have. Really wouldn't get into the bidding process.
Thank you.
I can't tell who is number 11. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Nancy.
I have a few questions. On 109, why are we having both the Commissioner of Economic Development and the Commissioner of Community Affairs? Could it be and or does it need to be and?
I think the reason for that was simply so that there would be two different agencies that could combine their efforts together to make a reasonable selection of projects. These projects are quite large. If you'll notice in here that it does have a minimum of $1 million, but some of the projects that we are considering in Georgia right now are in the $700 and $800 million of dollars. Some of them over $1 billion.
Would that be the stadium?
That is not the stadium that I'm referring to. Actually, the stadium portion of it came in much after this bill was introduced for the very first time, much later.
I have another question on page 5, lines 154. I don't know if you addressed that or not. Again, are we keeping the word governor in there?
Okay, thank you. Once again, let me look at this for a minute. All of the, as you know, all the commissioners, whether it be of community affairs or economic development, are going to consult with the governor. I would not have a problem with leaving that in. I don't think that changes, and I will certainly defer to our legislative council there. The governor is the CEO of the state of Georgia for all practical purposes, and I'm sure the Commission of Community Affairs will be consulting on projects. There may be other, and just let me add this very quickly, there may be other opportunities for these businesses to reap some benefits to come to Georgia. This is just one added and a very important piece of legislation that helps them to make a decision whether or not they go to Tennessee or they come to Georgia. And that's what that's all about. The governor here is naturally is consulting, and it doesn't say that he's making the decision.
Well, it does. If you go to line 197, page 6, it says following approval by the governor.
Well, everything's approved by the governor.
Well, I understand, but I, over the years have not seen this language that, after the governor. I just haven't seen that, and I'm just wondering why suddenly, we're looking at it, because if you go to lines 233, the act shall become effective upon its approval by the governor. Now, we always have that, so why are we putting by the governor everywhere else, too?
Well, again,
I'm saying this even if, regardless of what party the governor was, but I'm just really questioning that. Sometimes I think our departments need the work and they do the things that they need to be doing. And so I'm wondering why we're putting all that other in. And putting all the steps forward as though these aren't the steps that are part of rules and regs. Why are we micromanaging and making sure the governor does everything?
well, it's still, he approves, as he does, everything that, we pass a bill, he's got to sign.
I understand what you're saying, but I haven't seen this language in, and I wonder why we're beginning to put this language into a bill. I think sometimes we give the executive branch too much power out of the legislature, and we almost take power away from ourselves.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that's really happening in this bill, but I really seriously question that we keep putting that in.
I appreciate your question, but the reason why it did go back was some questions of whether or not, when we say sole discretion, that means that no one else has any input into this. And there is a process of any applicant who would ask for this designation. And these two entities would certainly be able to go through that process. Once all that process has been compiled, all that information, then they would go to the governor and say, this is a good bill, this is a good project, this is good for the state of Georgia, and we ask for you to sign off of it, as we do with any legislation.
I understand everything you're saying, but I'll go back to the fact that we don't put it into legislation every time the governor needs to approve something. Otherwise we'd be doing it on everything from Department of Community Health and everywhere. And I'm wondering why we're doing it in this. I truthfully would like to see it taken out, because that basically is the chain of command type thing, and I don't think that we need to be addressing chain of command, how it's set up and structured by the executive branch.
And I understand what you're saying, and I am not the author of this bill. My name is definitely on it, and I definitely approve it, but your chairman is the author of this bill, and it's been worked through, and this is the language that has met somewhat the litmus test, not only with the House, the Senate, and with the governor's office. And this is such an important bill that that particular issue, I don't think, really plays into this at all.
Agree and understand it's an important issue, and I do support it, the bill. It's just some of the language, and we are already making some corrections in this bill that weren't caught. So the fact that I'm suggesting another correction or another change, I don't think really alters the bill.
All right, again, you're asking me to make some decisions that I don't think...
No, I think I'm asking the committee to possibly make a decision.
Thank you, Representative Vinson. In the essence of time, we have another committee coming in here that's scheduled in here right now. I would like to ask if there's any action this committee would like to take.
Thank you, Chairman. Real quickly, the things I think the representative referring to are things that's already in statute and not changing without reference to the governor. That was not added to this bill. That's current law. And at the appropriate time, I would like to make a motion, but I think we have an amendment that needs to be made.
Do we have an amendment?
Do we have the amendment that we need to...
There was a correction of the word together.
Chairman Dixon.
I've got a little bit of a dilemma, because you got two different places that basically the governor has sole discretion on making the project. If the intention of the first change that brought this bill back to us was to remove that sole discretion, then there's several places it needs to be changed. So I'm at a loss.
Representative Pruitt.
I make a motion we do pass as it is, but I understand, but I think some of the language is really about final approval, but it's not sole discretionary decision-making.
Do I have a second? We have a motion to pass. We have a second. Any further discussion? Where are you? Yes, Representative Wilkinson.
I'm not going to put my changes in, but didn't we say at the beginning that we had to make one or two changes that were here because the language wasn't correct?
I'm not sure that the language is incorrect. I think we may need to check some of this before it goes to rules, but I would like to act on the motion at this time if we can. We can change it back.
Yes, it should be changed here, not in rules. That's the reason we're having this meeting.
Right? Yeah, I mean, with everything's going on.
How about a motion to table?
I think that would probably be something that would be appropriate. I think we really need the author of the bill, because someplace I see that perhaps it might, the governor is the person who actually contracts with just about everything we do in the state. But I think the author probably would give us more comfort in understanding why we have this, because right now we have such unclarity, and I wouldn't want to vote for something that we're not clear on.
May I respond to that very quickly? And I've got to go too. When this came to the House last year, there was one issue in that kept it from going to the floor, and that was because of that one phrase it says at the sole discretion of the governor. Over the last couple of days, we have the author has gone back and talked with the governor's office, and they have been agreeable, and they took that out. And that's the only change other than adding that was passed out of this committee just a few, maybe a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago. I can't remember now. But the issue is it was not going to pass through the House if it had sole discretion of the governor. And so the governor was willing to take that portion out of it. And that's the reason why in the very beginning, that's what it is. I personally think that the other references to the governor are not, really do not pertain to his ultimate control over this. But if that's the wishes of this committee, we'll certainly pass it back to the chairman.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. If the committee's pleasure, I'd like to ask all those in favor of passing this as is out of the committee to raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm a part of the committee. Do I get to vote?
6, 7. Everybody put them up, please. Okay, 7.
Are you?
8. Those. Okay, 8. Those opposed? 3. Motion does not carry. We're adjourned.
And